2006, I only knew Connie as a nice little woman who worked in a little room at the top of the building. But as I learn again and again, first impressions are deeply deceiving, and since then I have never stopped being surprised and awed by her. Her mystique grew when I encountered Connie one Saturday speaking here at a student publications workshop. I was running a Capitol Hill writing workshop at the time and was intrigued to find that her expertise, which as far as I knew was confined to development and international training, extended to student activism and journalism. I was soon to find that this was the tip of the iceberg, as Connie exceeds every expectation one could have for a normal person. Once derided as the most influential person on the right by an irate feminist author, this unassuming person always carries herself with humility and grace that belies her myriad accomplishments and the impact she has had on this country and the conservative movement. From her college days as a YAF activist to her current role as visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation and consultant, Connie has maintained a balance of thoughtfulness and activism, motherhood, and professionalism that all of us should strive for. Buoyed by her faith, Connie is a true servant leader. She has put everyone else first and accomplished things others can only dream of. When she asked me to lunch last summer saying we should get to know each other, I was stunned and honored. By then, I knew a lot more about Connie and couldn't believe such a great woman wanted to be my friend. We bonded over flatbread and curry at the Indian restaurant on the corner, discussing faith and Dorothy Sayers, who says in her essay, Why Work?, that we should make things as God makes them, for the sake of doing well, a thing that is well worth doing. This is a quotation that sums up very nicely Connie's approach to life. She does everything well because her work, indeed our work, is well worth doing. Please join me in welcoming Connie Marshner.
Wow, thank you, Nan. That was beautiful. That was, wow, thank you. And you're right, I'm not normal. My teenagers have told me that many times. But it really is just a really great pleasure to be here at LI. I am thrilled to be able to come back and share with my friends at LI what I have learned on a very steep learning curve for the last 6 months, which is about the problems and the solutions to the problems in the American healthcare system. And that's the topic today. It's in the news today, very current, going to remain very current for probably the next 4 or 5 years. So if this is your opening introduction to it, I hope it's a good one. And I want to start by asking you some questions. So just raise your hand or speak up. What's wrong with America's healthcare? Just speak up or raise your hand. What, in your perception, what's wrong with America's healthcare system? Too much government control. Okay, but now let me tell you, the healthcare has been the first or second issue of concern to voters since last year's elections. It's ongoing. Every poll of what the issues are of concern, it's right up there, first or second among the whole population, who don't view government as a problem necessarily. So what are they seeing that perception being 90% of reality in politics? What are the problems with American healthcare that the public sees, that the politicians on the other side are picking up on, that we need to be paying attention to? What are those problems? Pardon? That the poor are not receiving healthcare. That probably is a perception. What else? Too expensive. Okay. Yes, I mean that is what's perceived as the main problem. The perception is out there that the poor can't get health care. Now let me make a distinction here. Let me make a distinction between health care and health insurance. There is no shortage, no lack of access to health care in this country. No matter who you are, you can show up at an emergency room and you will be taken care of if you have a life-threatening condition. That's health care. Most of the squawking is about health insurance, and there's reasons why that is a problem. But let me read you, first of all, the alternate perspective from the Wall Street Journal talking about what's right about American health. This is a quote, July 24th. America's private system of medicine is the world's finest. It taps into the efficiency and flexibility of competition and markets. I'm going to take issue with that later on. It puts doctors and patients in charge, not government. It gives us the world's most talented doctors and nurses, most advanced hospitals, most promising medical research. Americans with access to this system receive outstanding care, and people from around the world come here to benefit from it. True enough. But notice they talked about the private system of healthcare. Now let's talk about what the problems are perceived as. In 1987, the typical American family's health insurance cost 7% of their income. Today, that's 20%. Employers are paying a larger and larger share also. It's getting painful. American business has to be competitive with the rest of the world. Well, American employers are currently bearing about twice the burden as their overseas competition for healthcare costs. That's a problem. 1 out of every $2 spent in this country on healthcare is spent by the government. That's a problem. 1 out of every $6 spent on healthcare in this country has nothing to do with a patient, a doctor, a treatment, a hospital. Simply paper shoveling. 1 out of every $6 is spent on bureaucracy. Healthcare is 20% of the GDP and growing. So it's a huge industry. It's a huge industry, but it is enormously inefficient. It is headed in the wrong direction. Now, how did we get to this state? How did we get here? The basic problem, and I tell me if you've ever thought of this before, the basic problem that has to be corrected before there can be any meaningful reforms is the current linkage of health insurance with employment. That is a fundamental problem. As I'll explain, it twists and corrupts every other aspect of it. Ironically, that is blamable on government wage controls. Because you know where that system came from? World War II. Employers were not allowed. There were wage and price controls. Employers were not allowed to offer extra salary. So they started giving benefits. And one of the benefits was health care. And at the end of the war, the insurance companies said, gee, this is a pretty good deal for us. We only have to sell to the employers. We don't have to go out and market to all these millions of people. So they lobbied Congress for the tax exemption. So if you get your insurance, your health insurance, through your employer, you get a huge tax saving. Now, that led to the perception among the American people that health insurance was kind of a free gift from their employer. People don't realize that it's their money, that they've earned it. And that's the irony. It's their money, but they have no say in how it's spent. You're lucky if your company offers you a choice between a PPO and an HMO, but you don't have anything to say about what's covered because your boss, your CEO, or whoever is in charge of buying your benefits, is pitched by the insurance company and they make the choice. Well, pardon me, naturally they're going to make the choice that's most advantageous to them. So that right there is certainly not a market force at work. A couple little curiosities. Did you know that 47% of people who get their health insurance from their employer are paying for abortion? For those of you who don't want to pay for abortion, that's a useful thing to know. Because if your company policy is covering it, you're subsidizing it. And at this point in time, unless you live in Massachusetts, about which we can talk later, the people in this country who have the most choice in their health care are the federal employees. Every year there's open season. You hear the ads all the time on the radio in October. Federal employees can choose from what? 248 different plans. They can shop around. among different providers. They can pick and choose the benefits they want. If they're 50 years old, they don't need to pay for maternity coverage. But the rest of us don't have that choice. Our plan either covers it or it doesn't. We don't have anything to say about it. So isn't it ironic that federal employees, government employees, have the most market freedom in choosing their health insurance? What's wrong with that picture? Now, the system of the employer providing health insurance worked okay when people stayed at the same job for 30 years, when there was primarily one wage earner, and when people viewed what we call health insurance as what today we call catastrophic insurance. I mean, today people don't view that anymore, probably because, they had the idea our health insurance was free. People began to expect the health insurance to cover everything. I mean, if you tried to get, the equivalent would be if you expected your car insurance to cover your oil changes, that you want your health insurance to cover every little thing. Prescriptions, you need a salve for your poison ivy. Well, that's a little thing, but people expect their health insurance to cover everything. So naturally, costs go up and up and up. There are social implications, too, of this system. One being of concern to family-oriented folks, and that is that there are a lot of women who have children who would rather be home or working part-time, who have to work full-time because their employer offers benefits and their husband's doesn't. And so in order to keep the family benefits, they stay in the workplace when they probably would rather not. Now, why is it that health insurance covers every little thing? Well, a lot of the fault can be laid at the door of the health insurance commissioners and the state legislators who have caved in to special interest groups and added a veritable Christmas tree of what are called mandates. Mandates are what the state requires every insurance plan sold in that state to cover. So, for instance, maternity coverage. Every state requires maternity coverage to be offered by an insurance policy sold in that state. There are 1,900 mandates nationwide of what insurance policies must cover. New Jersey takes the cake, you might say, because they have more than any other state. But let me just mention a couple that might be of interest to you. 13 states require insurance coverage of in vitro fertilization. Now, there are, $10,000 to $20,000 a shot at in vitro fertilization. Now, I could see if you're a young couple and you're having trouble getting pregnant, yeah, you might want to buy a rider to pay for that. But why should everybody else have to pay for it? $10,000 or $20,000 a try. And a lot of folks have some moral problems with that, too. 30 states mandate the coverage of contraception. Well, if you're 55 years old, you don't want to have to pay for that. 8 states, by the way, mandate insurance coverage of domestic partners. And the fact that domestic partners are covered, you might think about that one a couple minutes and realize that there are certain other medical costs that are probably going to follow from that. And by the way, Virginia is one of the states that requires partner coverage, as well as contraception coverage. So one thing after another, premiums go up and up and up. If people try to buy their own insurance, the tax alone can run the cost up by another 50%. If you try to buy your own insurance, if your employer doesn't offer it anymore. Small businesses are very, very hard-pressed to get insurance coverage. It's becoming, it is a real problem. Now, let me ask you another question. Who do you think the uninsured are? Who is the demographic group that is most likely to be uninsured? Now, you're right. It's young, healthy people. Young, healthy people are the most likely to be uninsured. Not so much women, men also. Why? Because they're not required to get coverage. They could pay, $100 at their place of work, but they'd rather save the money for a ski trip. This is the biggest group of uninsured in the country. Now, that's fine. That's their freedom, except they go skiing, and then they crash into a tree, and then guess who pays their health care? You and me. So you got to ask, is that really a good idea? But that's who's uninsured. There is There is a very, very small segment of the population that's hardcore uninsured. Most people go in and out of insurance. They have a job, the boss has the insurance, they've got it, then they change jobs, or the company no longer carries it, or the wife picks it up. Most people don't go very long without insurance. That is true also of the children who are to benefit from the S-CHIP program. Does everybody know about S-CHIP? It's a state children's health insurance program, which is currently up for reauthorization, probably voted on last night in the Senate. And it's the current heartthrob on the liberal end of things. And they're claiming that, the children need insurance. Well, 70% of the kids at 200% of the poverty level were eligible for private insurance in the preceding 6 months. The parents chose not to get it because, hey, it's easier to get it, free. Don't get me off on that. So now the last time Congress tried a major overhaul, of course, was 93, 94. We know how that ended. It basically died of its own weight because Hillary Care was just too heavy. It never even came to a vote. It just died. Thank heavens it died. But now the issue is coming back. People are demanding something. Last year, of course, the candidates were talking about Iraq, but it was up there. Healthcare was up there in the polls. It's up there in the polls now, and nature will not tolerate a vacuum. Our side has got to know how to talk about this. The left sees their opportunity to advance their agenda of socialized medicine, otherwise known as, and learn this phrase, single payer insurance. That's the code word for socialized medicine because the single payer is government. So that's what the hard left is looking for. Now, there are moderate Democrats who are willing to work with Republicans, and there are some interesting developments. But let me back up a little bit and give you more principles before I give you politics. Okay. The problem is that we do have all those lovely things Wall Street Journal said about how great our healthcare is. Absolutely true. But we have a very inefficient and cost ineffective delivery of our healthcare. We have great healthcare in this country, yes, best in the world, but it's very inefficiently delivered, very costly. That's why we need health insurance reform. Healthcare delivery in this country is structured currently in a way that prevents market forces from working. You get your health insurance from your employer. You go to Dr. Smith. Well, maybe Dr. Smith really has a horrible bedside manner and his staff is ridiculously rude and it's inconvenient and you really would rather go to Dr. Jones. If you had a free market, you could go to Dr. Jones, but you can't. So you have to keep going to Smith. So what incentive does Dr. Smith have to improve anything? None, because you have no freedom to go anywhere else. So there's no market forces there. And the basic reason there's no market force is because of that linkage of healthcare with employment. That's a tax reform measure. That's the tax reform that is fundamental and needed. The president made some mention of it in the State of the Union message, where he proposed a $15,000 tax credit. I forget if he wanted it refundable or not. There's arguments both ways. $15,000 tax credit for health insurance. That's a great idea. It's about 3 years too late coming from him. But last night in the Senate debate over S-CHIP, Senator Tom Coburn and allies proposed an alternative bill, which would have been a really awesome, radical tax reform aimed at healthcare. And the first thing is you've got to sever that connection between employment and insurance. Let people buy their own health insurance. Make it portable. Portability is another key word that you should remember. That means it belongs to me. I can take it with me. If I want to work part-time and I can still pay the premiums, cool. It's my health insurance. I mean, think about it. You don't buy your car insurance from Ford or General Motors. You buy it for yourself, right? If you cross state lines and you move from Maryland to Virginia, you keep the same car insurance policy. Your life insurance, you can buy it from anywhere in the country, right? If you're a Catholic, you want to buy it from the Knights of Columbus, cool. Well, how come you can't get your health insurance from the Knights of Columbus? because you can't buy health insurance across state lines. Well, that's the next big reform. Get the tax break so that you can afford to buy your own health insurance, have it belong to you, and then buy it anywhere you want, anywhere in the country. Why not? We do that with other insurance. Why not with our health insurance? If you had that kind of market freedom, you'd have a lot going on. You would see in the course of time, business being what it is, innovation being what it is, somebody would say, hey, there are a lot of Christians out there, a lot of pro-lifers out there. I bet they'd like a health insurance policy that didn't cover things they object to. Why don't I offer one? And if the markets were open and people could buy across state lines, you'd have faith-based health insurance popping up. And by the way, there has been, on an experimental basis, a Catholic health insurance program, which is currently available only to federal employees in southeastern Illinois, because it came in under a waiver from HHS as a federal employee health benefit plan. It's a Catholic program, St. Francis Health, I think it's called, and it offers healthcare totally in conformity with Catholic health principles. And guess what? Because it doesn't cover sterilizations, abortions, contraception, the premiums are like 2 to 3% less than comparable premiums. So there will be a financial incentive there for faith-based providers to get into the health insurance business. And wouldn't that be great? Because then you wouldn't have to worry if your health insurance was paying something your conscience didn't like. So that kind of opening up of freedom of conscience would follow from opening up the markets of healthcare, health insurance, I should say. But the fundamental thing is it's got to begin with the tax reform. Now, you got to realize insurance companies are the enemy. Insurance companies like the current system. They know it. It's the business model they've followed for decades. They don't want to change. So they have themselves set pretty well under the current system. They don't want to change. So don't look for any support from them. They're going to be on the other side. But our job as conservatives is to change the way Americans think about healthcare. We as conservatives, and I can use this phrase in here, we can look at healthcare as a commodity. It's something you buy. When you go out to buy a car, you like to have choice and you compare and you make the best choice. Well, when you buy health insurance, you should compare and make the best choice for you. But most people are scared of that word. They're scared of thinking of healthcare as something they buy. They think of it sort of as a benefit. They think of it as an entitlement. That's a mindset that really, really is deeply ingrained. And so when you're talking to people, you've got to watch your language, because you don't want to make them think you're a cold-hearted capitalist. You care about them. And so, healthcare is something that we all need, and make sure you don't sound cold-hearted. Survey research that was commissioned by the Heritage Foundation showed that the word consumer, consumer-driven healthcare, for instance, was very bad in focus groups. Because people don't think of themselves as consumers of healthcare, which is part of the problem. We've got to start thinking of ourselves as consumers of healthcare. Because if you think of yourself as a consumer of something, you're going to exercise responsibility, and you're going to spend your money wisely, and you're going to make a good market choice. We've got to start thinking that way. That'll be the next American Revolution. Because if we don't start demanding the right to take responsibility for our own health care, federal bureaucrats are going to be given that responsibility. And that's simply the long and short of it. This S-chip bill in the Senate, which probably passed last night, I didn't get a chance to check the news this morning before coming, would have done exactly that. And the House version is even worse. The version that came out of the House Ways and Means Committee is unbelievable. It doesn't even create S-chip. It just creates the Children's Health Insurance Program. It would raise the definition of child to 24 years of age. It would make eligible families up to $73,000 a year to have their children receiving federal health insurance. 3 out of 4 kids in the country would be receiving federal health insurance under the plan that the House of Representatives is looking to pass. It's upon us, folks. The socialized medicine fight is not something that's going to happen after 2008. It's happening now. And we are not talking about it. We are not up on the arguments. Our folks don't know the lingo. We don't know how we're going to handle it. Now, you know what national health insurance looks like. Bureaucrats making decisions. Bureaucrats make decisions. No freedom of choice. No consideration of conscience. No consideration of values. And most of all, spiraling costs. Out of control costs. And when you have out of control costs, what follows as the night the day? Sooner or later, rationing. That's the inevitable course. All the Michael Moore slash and burn kind of media, he praises Canada. Well, in Canada, you know, if you get diagnosed with cancer, there is an 18-month waiting period for an MRI. A lot of good that'll do, right? So that's the choice. I mean, the choice is either we have the freedom to choose the healthcare we trust, or some bureaucrat is going to be making life and death decisions for us. Now, the current state of play politically. I've talked about the S-chip bill. The Coburn bill was an alternative. It is the gold standard of the conservative alternative, but it's very radical. It's a tax reform measure, but it has all the right principles in it. That should be a guidance in the future. There is sort of a truce between Democrats and Republicans. There's a Bennett-Wyden bill, which contains some good principles in it, may or may not go anywhere, may end up as a compromise bill, but that's currently there. S-chip is what we don't want. It's the gold standard of socialized medicine. The next interesting place to watch is the states, because the states are very interested in solving this problem at the state level. And this is really the greatest hopeful sign. The Heritage Foundation for years has been working on something called the Health Insurance Exchange Model. And this is basically taking the principle of the open season and applying it at the state level. Not that the state will provide the insurance, but that the state will organize a delivery system so that everybody in the state has access to a whole menu of health insurance options. Think of a farmer's market where, you know, all these different stalls are set up. There's one out here on the green every Wednesday, I guess. And if you're looking for tomatoes, you go to the folks who are selling tomatoes. If you're looking for corn, you walk over here to where they're selling corn. Well, a health insurance exchange is that kind of model for health insurance, that every health insurance program in the state would be available to every person in the state. Now, in order to make that happen, the state has to basically redesign their whole delivery system. And the state has to do that. Massachusetts has actually done it. Massachusetts' plan is far from perfect, but it does have some very important market principles at play. And currently, because of the way Massachusetts was structured, the premium costs are $100, give or take a few, on either side of $100 a month for a healthy person in the younger age bracket. That's awfully good. For now, California, Schwarzenegger said he was doing something like that. His is totally bad. He got the rhetoric and he turned it over to the bureaucrats. So the Schwarzenegger policy is just absolutely horrible. You know, don't go there. However, 25, 30 states are seriously looking at reform. And Virginia introduced a measure last session, which was referred to the governor's commission and kind of died there. But there should be a move in Virginia to pursue this. If you want any information on this, the Health Insurance Exchange offers the tax break, the portability, and the free market. Go to the Heritage Foundation website, www.heritage.org, and there's more information on the Health Insurance Exchange than, you know, it'll sink a ship. So more information you need. But that is, to me, a very, very encouraging sign that there are many, many states looking to do this. And isn't that just perfect? perfect for our philosophy of federalism. Let the states solve the problem. And guess what? If the state of Massachusetts, which it currently can say, well, all the citizens of Massachusetts have health insurance, except for a few who have been exempted. And there are some, of course, whose premiums are paid by the state, but that's no different from the current situation. If Massachusetts can say, well, we surely don't need national health insurance, we've taken care of the problem. Just imagine if 20 other states could say, there are no citizens of our state uninsured. What would that do to Barack's head of steam saying, Americans are uninsured? If a number of states could say, hey, we've solved the problem, bye-bye. That would make a great deal of, I'm just getting a note here that the Coburn Amendment yesterday failed by a vote of 37 to 59. No surprise there, 37 was pretty good. That was the Coburn alternative bill last night in the debate. Thank you for telling me. It failed. We're not ready for it. The country's not ready for it. We've got to keep working at it. But anyhow, okay. I'll stop there for questions, and then we just repeat the soundbite. This is the phrase you want to keep thinking of. We conservatives want to give people the power to choose the health care they trust. The left wants to give GS-12s the power to choose life or death for all of us. That's, we want to give people the freedom to choose the health care they trust. That's what we're all about. And, you can't be something with nothing. So we can't oppose socialized medicine unless we have our own coherent ideas. I've given you some of those. I'm open for questions. Thank you very much. Yes. Yes, Jim.
Connie, your remarks are very timely because Giuliani and Romney jumped into this, maybe it was last night, but they jumped into it big time. And Romney is, of course, bragging about the health insurance bill he got through Massachusetts. And there's some question about that because being a very liberal state, he had to put in some aspects that aren't very attractive to conservatives. But there's going to have to be a major issue in the Republican platform. What's your recommendation of how we can, as conservatives, really influence what the Republicans put in their platform?
Well, of course, speaking as a private citizen entirely, everybody in this room should go to your precinct meetings and should strive to be a delegate to the platform committee in your state. I mean, we've got to get the grassroots pressure from the bottom up to get into that platform conversation. I mean, everybody here should be involved in their party process, Republican or Democrat, whatever it may be. And the conversation, we've got to start talking about it, because the more we talk about it with our neighbors and our friends, the more comfortable our side will be with the issue. Most people are not at all comfortable talking about this because it's very complicated. And if you talk to a policy wonk about it, after about 65 seconds, they'll be off talking in a jargon that nobody else understands. So it's really a challenge to all of us in the conservative movement to make it understandable to the layman, and then to talk to our friends about it and get the conversation going. That's what we have to do. Helen. Wait a second.
You hadn't mentioned the doctors at all, and I wondered if they would be our allies.
They should be. Because they are getting a very raw deal from all this reform. One of the things in the bill in the House is to cut their payments by another 10%, their Medicare reimbursements. So they should be our allies. They're suffering a lot. But the problem is that they're not the AMA plays both sides against the middle. So they should be our allies. And at the local level, the individual doctor is. So take it up with your local doctor and, keep him informed and see if you can persuade him to write a letter. And by the way, again, speaking as a private citizen, which is entirely what I'm speaking as, if you want to do something worthwhile today, contact your senators and congressmen and tell them to vote against S-chip. And when we come back in August, after the president has vetoed it and Congress tries to override, tell them to support the veto, because that's going to be a very chancy thing, whether there's enough votes at this point to even sustain the veto. Other questions?
Thank you for your comments. I like the idea of separating the healthcare from work. So please champion that and continue that. I was unclear on the tax, why we need to have a tax reform. I wasn't sure about that. If you could clarify that for me as well, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Currently, when you get your health insurance through your employer, that's pre-tax income. That's pre-tax dollars. So you're not paying tax on that portion of your income that's buying that health insurance. And I believe that's the case with the employers too. I don't know if you've gotten into that. So the employers aren't paying tax on that money. So that's pre-tax dollars for everybody. If your employer isn't offering it and you go out to buy it, immediately, apart from the fact that you don't have a pool, that you're not part of a larger group, the fact that you're having to pay tax, buy it with after-tax dollars, jacks the price up as much as 50%. So because in the current employer-based system, you're buying it with pre-tax dollars, you've got to level the playing field. And that's why the president proposed the tax credit for buying health insurance. Because that way, individuals buying on their own in a free market would be competitive on a level playing field with people getting it through their employer. And that way, more people would be able to buy it themselves and exercise market forces. Yes.
Health insurance problem right now, and we have 40 employees, and it's a strain on our business because it's $122,000 a year for us to pay part of their insurance, and then the insurance isn't very good because we can't afford to buy the insurance. You know, I think there's a $5,000 deductible if you go in the hospital. People expect that benefit, so if we don't offer benefits, then we can't get the good employees and keep them. And if we just offer, you know, money every month and say, this is for your health insurance, like just tell them that, they're not going to go buy it. They're just going to keep the extra money. So, I mean, it's kind of a hard situation to be in.
Oh, it's a terribly hard situation.
And then us as a family, we can't just get insurance for our family because we have to offer it to everybody. Or, you know, so what do you suggest there? I mean,
you are caught. You are caught in the bind that the whole system produces. If there were a health insurance exchange in Virginia, what you could do is you could say to your employees, I'm giving you X amount of dollars per month for health insurance, and I'm designating as your provider the state health insurance exchange. And then they could take the $100 or $200 a month from you and go to the insurance exchange and pick out the policy that suited them the best. That's the idea of the exchange. That's how it works. And Virginia is not one of the states that's actively considering it. So there's something to think about there. But that's how it would work. Now it works in Massachusetts because everybody had to buy it. And the young folks didn't like that. They wanted, they didn't want to be forced to buy health insurance. Some of the libertarians said, well, hey, that's violating their freedom. Well, yeah, but is it violating their freedom to make them buy car insurance too? I mean, the alternative is so much worse. So if everybody has to buy it, then the costs come down for everyone. That's one of the things that I hate so much about S-chip. Because if you take all these healthy kids as a group are the healthiest segment of the population, if you take them out of the private insurance market, naturally the costs of the private insurance are going to go up. So that's, another level of viciousness of the socialist planners. They know exactly what they're doing with that. There were some other hands.
One more question.
Okay.
But what I want to know is you said you do not like Schwarzenegger's plan, and I wonder if you could, because he's popular with some, and I wanted to know what were the major problems very quickly with his plan in California.
Basically the major problem is he turned it over to the bureaucrats in his Department of Health and Human Services, and they designed a plan the bureaucrats like, which is not a market-driven plan. There's a memo by Robert Moffat on the Heritage website, particularly analyzing the Schwarzenegger plan. So if you go to heritage.org and access that, you'll have the skinny on the Schwarzenegger plan. You'll get the details, which probably are better coming straight from him than through me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Connie. Explained that very well. It's rather interesting for healthcare early in the morning. Thank you. As tradition, here at the Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast, I'd like to present you with this beautiful Adam Smith scarf.
Always wanted one. Thank
It
you.
looks beautiful. It looks beautiful. Thank you. I have a few closing. Just a few concluding remarks. Please join us on Wednesday, September 5th, for the next breakfast featuring Representative Mark Sauter. Also, anyone who has not had a tour of our building or who would like a tour of our building right now, you could please approach the podium. So Emily Salisbury, standing there in the doorway, she's on the side, so be happy to give you a tour of the building. Thank you for coming, and great day. Yes. I don't have any other information on me. Yes. Yes, he is.
Mark Sauter is a long time health care.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, did he?
He was here a few years.
Ah. Okay. Thank you. Everyone have a great day. Thank you.